The dining hall of a mansion in an upscale American neighborhood sparkled with arrogance and wealth. Distinguished guests laughed, silverware clinked, and champagne flowed. At the center, a young black maid, humble uniform pressed with care, tried to serve without trembling. Suddenly, the millionaire's wife grabbed her apron, and a sharp tear broke the silence, and the uniform ripped. The humiliation happened in front of everyone. The house froze. And the maid's reaction left the entire mansion speechless. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. The old grandfather clock struck 7 when the Whitmore mansion began to fill with guests. Imported cars rolled up. Gowns shimmered under the lights. Trained laughter floated across the marble hall. In the kitchen, chaos reigned. Trays leaving, orders flying, pans sizzling. Rafaela, 23, newly arrived from Alabama, hands steady, heart whispering prayers, adjusted her navy blue uniform, worn but clean, pressed with love. "Hold the glasses from the right side, keep your head up," whispered Mrs. Lords, the veteran cook, her voice warm and protective. "And child, don't let them break you inside." Rafaela nodded. For 3 months she had been working here, sending part of her pay back to her sick grandmother. At night she repeated her grandmother's words, "God never abandons the righteous." That promise was her anchor in stormy seas. In the main hall, Vivian Whitmore, the millionaire's wife, ruled like a queen. Cold beauty, sharp smile, eyes that weighed people like coins. At her side, Gregory Whitmore, the businessman, stood silent, polished like marble, empty like stone. "I want perfection, Vivian," a guest said, adjusting her pearls. Vivian smirked. "In my house, perfection is the bare minimum." Rafaela entered with a tray of appetizers. She walked slowly, as trained. Most guests didn't notice her, except when they reached for salmon bites. A gentleman asked for another napkin, a lady more champagne. Rafaela served politely. Then the glass doors opened. A cold breeze rushed in. The linen napkins fluttered, one landing at Vivian's designer heel. Not a disaster, but enough to ignite her fury. "You," she pointed at Rafaela, "can't even hold a tray properly? Are you turning my home into a picnic?" Some guests forced a laugh. Rafaela bowed her head gently. "I'm sorry, ma'am. It was the draft." "Oh, of course. Blame the wind," Vivian snapped. Lesson 1. In my house, even the wind obeys. The hall fell silent. Gregory observed from afar, unmoved. Thomas, the butler, stepped forward, but stopped when Vivian shot him a warning glare. Vivian's eyes narrowed at Rafaela's uniform. This fabric, cheap. And that seam, pathetic. Mrs. Lords, watching from the kitchen doorway, clenched her chest. She knew the storm was about to strike. "I washed it today, ma'am," Rafaela said, steady but soft. "It's the only one I have." Vivian sneered, grabbed the apron between 2 fingers, and in one brutal motion, ripped it open. The sound of tearing cloth echoed louder than the string quartet. Rafaela's blouse showed through. Gasps filled the room. "Now it suits you," Vivian declared with venom. Rafaela's hands tightened around the tray, but she didn't drop it. Her eyes burned, not with tears, but with fire. She heard her grandmother's voice in her heart. "Respect given is respect earned. If they tear your dignity, God will restore it double." Thomas stepped in, alarmed. "Madam, please." "Silence, Thomas," Vivian hissed. "In this house, I teach manners." Some guests looked away in shame. Others stayed fascinated by the cruelty. Rafaela breathed deep. Her voice came clean, calm, unshaken. "With all respect, Mrs. Whitmore, in this house I may serve. But life itself teaches respect." A murmur rippled across the hall. Vivian laughed, bitter. Well, the little maid has opinions." Rafaela set the tray down gently, aligned the glasses, and held the torn apron like a banner. Her posture was unyielding. "I can serve in a torn uniform. she said firmly, but I will not allow my faith or my worth to be torn with it. Mrs. Lords pressed her crucifix, whispering a prayer. Thomas stood frozen. Gregory crossed his arms. For the first time, his jaw tightened. Something in Rafaela's courage unsettled him. Vivian, enraged, "You're fired, and you won't be paid for tonight. Leave my sight." The room fell silent. The music stopped. Rafaela didn't flinch. "No," she replied, serene. "Not yet." Gasps erupted. A maid saying no to the lady of the house? Rafaela stepped closer, the torn apron swaying like a flag of defiance. "I will finish my tray and serve every guest. Then I'll change, collect my things, and speak with Mr. Gregory." Vivian's face twisted. "My husband doesn't speak with servants." Rafaela stood her ground. "Tonight he will." The air froze. Gregory's jaw tightened again. Something in her voice struck deeper than anyone could see. Vivian hissed, "You decide nothing here." Rafaela's voice softened like a prayer. "God decides." And with quiet grace she began serving again. One glass at a time, her hands steady, her dignity unshaken. Guests accepted their drinks with shame in their eyes, some whispering blessings under their breath. An older lady, touched by Rafaela's strength, murmured, "God bless you, child." Vivian trembled with fury but held herself back, afraid the scandal would turn on her. When the tray was done, Rafaela bowed lightly and walked to the laundry room. Thomas followed. Mrs. Lords dropped her ladle, tears in her eyes, and went too. Inside, the smell of detergent, the hum of machines. "Child," Lords said, touching the rip. "God saw this, he will act." Thomas whispered. This was public humiliation. The police, a lawyer, something must be done. Rafaela looked out the small window toward the glowing garden lights. Her voice was calm. "I won't scream tonight, I'll speak. To him. And when I do, it won't be anger. It will be truth." Thomas frowned. "Why would Mr. Gregory listen to you?" Rafaela held the torn apron, her eyes filled with memory, not tears. "Because," she said slowly, "he knows this fabric, and he knows who stitched it." Lords gasped. "What are you saying, child?" Rafaela didn't answer. She folded the apron neatly, placed it in a plastic bag, and fixed her gaze on Gregory's heavy office door. Decisions that ruined lives were made there every day. But tonight, truth would walk in. In the ballroom, Vivian sharpened her next move. In the office, Gregory waited unknowingly. And in the laundry room, a young woman's faith turned into courage. When Rafaela placed her hand on that doorknob, the entire mansion held its breath. The laundry room was a world apart from the glittering ballroom upstairs. The scent of detergent, the hiss of steam from irons, and the constant hum of machines wrapped the small space in warmth. Yet Rafaela felt the sting of humiliation burning colder than ice. She stood near the sink, staring at the torn uniform folded neatly in a bag. Her hands trembled, not from weakness, but from holding back the storm within her. Mrs. Lords, the cook who had known her since the day she started, reached out and cupped Rafaela's face. "Don't cry here, child. These walls have heard too many tears already." But the dam broke. Silent tears slipped down Rafaela's cheeks, falling onto the concrete floor. She didn't sob loudly. She wept with dignity, like someone who had been forced to hide her pain all her life. "I wasn't born to be anyone's servant," Rafaela whispered. "I came here to work, to send money to my grandma, to survive. But she treated me like I was nothing." Thomas, the butler, adjusted his tie nervously. He had worked for the Whitmores for 20 years, and in all that time, he had seen cruelty. But tonight it felt different. Tonight he had seen a fire in Rafaela's eyes that unsettled even the master of the house. "Listen," Thomas said softly, glancing at the door to make sure no one was near. "What Mrs. Whitmore did out there wasn't just cruel. It was unlawful. You could take her to court. People talk. And if word spreads—" Rafaela shook her head. "I don't want money. I don't want revenge in a courtroom. I want the truth. The truth will be louder than any lawyer. Her words made Lourdes cross herself. Child, you speak like someone who knows something. What truth are you carrying? Rafaela avoided their eyes, staring instead at the torn seam. Her fingers caressed the fabric with a tenderness that spoke of memories long buried. This apron wasn't bought from a store, she said quietly. It was stitched, long ago, by hands that once belonged in this very house. Thomas froze, confusion clouding his face. What do you mean? Whose hands? Rafaela wiped her tears, gathering her strength. Not now, not yet. But when the time comes, everyone will know. The room fell into silence, broken only by the hum of the machines. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Vivian's sharp voice sliced through the stillness. Rafaela, I hope you've packed your things. You'll be gone before midnight. Lourdes placed a finger on her lips, signaling Rafaela to stay quiet. Vivian's heels clicked past the door and faded toward the ballroom again. Only then did Rafaela exhale. Thomas leaned closer, whispering urgently, You can't face her alone. Gregory is colder than stone. He won't care. Rafaela's eyes glowed with quiet defiance. You're wrong. He will care, because no matter how hard he pretends, he remembers. She lifted her chin, dried her tears, and straightened her back. The timid maid had vanished. In her place stood a young woman wrapped in faith and determination. Tonight, she said, voice steady, this house will remember who I am. And with that, Rafaela picked up the bag with the torn uniform, turned toward the hallway, and began walking toward Gregory's office. Upstairs, the guests drank and laughed unaware. Downstairs, destiny was moving step by step, carried by a girl who refused to bow her head any longer. Gregory Whitmore's office looked more like a vault than a room. Walnut paneling, a steel gray desk, spotless glass cases displaying awards that praised his vision. Numbers, mergers, and quarterly wins stared back from framed magazine covers. But tonight, none of them could quiet the sound of tearing fabric still echoing in his head. He stood at the window, watching the reflection of the ballroom in the black pane. Guests paraded past like ornaments. Vivian's laughter drifted up the stairs, a bright, brittle thing. He loosened his cufflinks, then tightened them again. The habit of a man who controlled everything except the one thing that mattered. A soft knock. Thomas slipped in, closed the door behind him, and kept his voice low. Sir, Miss Rafaela would like a word. Gregory didn't turn. This is not a good time. With respect, sir, it is. Silence. The kind that measures men. Gregory finally faced him. Send her in. Alone. Thomas hesitated, then nodded and disappeared. Moments later, Rafaela stepped inside, holding a plastic bag with the torn uniform. She didn't bow. She didn't shrink. She stood as if her spine were a line drawn by God himself. Gregory gestured to a chair. Sit. I'll stand, she said, calm. He studied her. The steadiness, the storm contained. You created a scene, he said. My wife is volatile. You should have stayed out of her way. Your wife ripped my uniform in front of your guests. I will arrange compensation, he replied, voice flat. A month's pay, 2, and a non-disclosure agreement. You'll sign it, and the matter ends. Rafaela set the bag on the desk, the plastic whispering against the polished wood. You think dignity has a price tag? A muscle twitched in his jaw. I think problems have solutions. This isn't a problem, Mr. Whitmore, she said. It's a mirror. He held her gaze a beat too long, then looked away as if the room had shifted by an inch. You've worked here 3 months, he said. I know every employee's file. You are capable. Quiet. Why tonight? Rafaela opened the bag and drew out the apron, the torn seam like a wound across simple cloth. She laid it flat on the desk. Because some things shouldn't be hidden anymore. He glanced down and paused. Not at the tear, but at the stitching. A tiny, precise cross-stitch on the hem. Old-fashioned, familiar. His voice thinned. Where did you get this? It was given to me, she said. Long ago. The door burst open. Vivian swept in, perfume first, fury second. So you are here, she snapped at Rafaela. Thomas will be dealt with. Gregory and this. Gregory's tone cooled to ice. Vivian. Close the door. She smirked, did not obey. Everyone downstairs is talking. That girl embarrassed us. Rafaela turned to her, calm as a prayer. A breeze embarrasses no one. A cruel hand does. Vivian's lip curled. I should call security. Call them, Rafaela said, not raising her voice. But I will walk out with this apron. And tomorrow I will walk into a place where voices are heard. Vivian laughed. Court, media, please. You are nothing. Rafaela's eyes darkened. Not with hate, with memory. There was another woman once, she said. She worked in this house before these walls gleamed. She stitched aprons and hope into the seams. She believed this home would protect her. Gregory inhaled, a barely audible sound. Vivian rolled her eyes. Gregory, end this. He did not move. Rafaela touched the hem. Her hands shook when she coughed, she whispered. But she still sewed for the kitchen staff. She taught, every stitch is a prayer, sew it straight, God sees. The room drew tighter around them. Vivian scoffed. Enough of this melodrama. Gregory. Quiet, he said. One word, heavy as a gavel. Vivian snapped her mouth shut, startled. Gregory leaned forward, eyes pinned to the hem. Who taught you that stitch? Rafaela met his gaze. The same woman who once mended the cuff of a small boy's winter coat in this very room. He spilled cocoa on it after sledding in the back lawn. She scolded him for not wearing gloves. The office seemed to tilt. The memory, a red scarf, a laughing boy, cocoa steam, slid through Gregory's composure like a blade. What was her name? He asked, voice roughening despite himself. Rafaela let the question hang. Names matter, she said. But more than names, deeds. Tonight your house chose humiliation. What do you choose? Vivian found her voice. Gregory, do not let this... Enough, he said, colder now. To Rafaela, 2 months' pay becomes 6. Health coverage extended. A letter of recommendation. Rafaela's answer was immediate. No. Then what do you want? Respect. And the truth. He exhaled sharply. Truth is expensive. Lies cost more. For a moment, only the clock on the credenza dared to speak. Vivian crossed her arms. You don't negotiate with staff. Rafaela didn't look at her. I'm not negotiating, I'm remembering. She slid a small, folded photo from her pocket and placed it beside the apron. A faded snapshot of a kitchen table, a woman's hands guiding a little boy's fingers through fabric, teaching him the cross-stitch. The boy's face was turned, but the jawline, the eyes, recognizable. Color drained from Gregory's cheeks. Vivian leaned in, squinted, then scoffed. Another trick. Rafaela's voice softened, almost tender. You promised her once, she said to Gregory. You promised you'd grow up to be a man who protected the people who protected you. He swallowed. Who are you? Rafaela's answer was a whisper and a verdict. The granddaughter of the woman who kept that promise alive when no one else would. Vivian laughed, brittle, too loud. This is absurd. Rafaela lifted the apron, held the torn seam to the light. Absurd is a house that forgets the hands that built it. Gregory looked from the stitch to the photo, then to Rafaela. When he spoke, the mask was cracking. Say her name, he said. Rafaela let the name rise like a prayer and a bell. Eunice Barker. The room went still. Vivian blinked, searching her memory and finding nothing. Gregory closed his eyes as if the sound had opened a door he had boarded shut. He opened them again, all steel gone. Leave us, Vivian. Excuse me? Now. Vivian's face flamed. She stared between them, sensing a power shift she didn't understand. This isn't over. she hissed, and slammed the door behind her. Silence returned, not empty, but charged. Rafaela folded the photo back into her pocket. "I don't want money," she said. "I want what you promised as a boy." Gregory pressed his palms to the desk. A pen fell, rolled, and clinked against the floor. "Then you will have it," he said, voice steadying. "But promises have consequences." Rafaela nodded once. "So does cruelty." While tension thickened inside Gregory's office, the kitchen below pulsed with a different rhythm. Pots simmered, ovens glowed, and the scent of garlic bread masked the sourness of humiliation still lingering in the air. Mrs. Lords wiped her eyes with the back of her hand as she stirred a pot. She had cooked in this mansion for 30 years, seen servants come and go, but tonight she felt a fire she hadn't felt in decades. "They think we're invisible," she muttered, tasting the sauce. "But God sees everything." The other staff members worked quietly, whispering like a flock of frightened birds. Yet their eyes kept darting to the laundry door, where Rafaela had disappeared minutes ago, carrying dignity like armor. Finally, the door opened. Rafaela stepped back into the kitchen, her hair tied, her blouse simple, no apron to hide the tear. She looked taller than before, not in inches, but in spirit. The room stilled. "Are you all right?" asked Maria, a younger maid with trembling hands. Rafaela managed a small smile. "All right enough. Better than she expected me to be." Mrs. Lourdes set down the spoon and pulled Rafaela into her arms. "Child, you walked through fire tonight. I didn't walk alone," Rafaela whispered. "I walked with every prayer my grandmother stitched into that uniform." Maria moved, spoke timidly. "I've been saving to study nursing, but every time Mrs. Whitmore shouts, I think, maybe I'm not good enough." Rafaela looked her in the eye. "Don't let her voice be louder than God's." Those words rippled through the kitchen. Even the dishwasher, usually silent, lifted his head. Thomas entered then, smoothing his jacket, eyes darting nervously. "Gregory knows," he said softly. She showed him the stitch. She showed him the photo. Gasps filled the room. "And?" Lourdes pressed. Thomas hesitated. He didn't dismiss her. He listened. And for the first time in years, his face changed. Rafaela placed a hand on the counter, steady. Change doesn't come easy to men like him, but the truth has a way of breaking stone. The staff gathered closer. Maria wiped her tears. The dishwasher whispered a prayer. For the first time in that mansion, the kitchen felt less like a workplace and more like a chapel, where faith was baked into bread and courage boiled in pots. Then, the swinging door creaked. Vivian herself strode in, her gown glittering, her fury sharp. She looked out of place amid flour and fire. "All of you," she snapped, "back to work. No gossip, no whispers. You are here to serve, not to plot." The room stiffened. Maria froze mid-motion. The dishwasher lowered his gaze. But Rafaela didn't bow. She stepped forward, wiping her hands calmly on a towel. "We are working, Mrs. Whitmore, but we are not plotting. We are standing." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "Standing? Against me?" "Not against you," Rafaela said, voice even. "For ourselves." The words carried weight, planting courage in the staff, like seeds in soil. Vivian's face darkened. This rebellion will end. Tonight. She turned sharply, her gown brushing the flour-dusted floor, and disappeared back toward the ballroom. The staff exhaled as one. Mrs. Lourdes whispered, "Child, you've lit a fire, and once it burns, no one can put it out." Rafaela looked around the kitchen. The tired faces, the weary hands, the quiet hearts that had carried years of silence. Tonight, silence had broken. "This isn't just my fight," she said softly. "It's ours. And it's not only against her. It's for every one of us who's been told we're less." The kitchen glowed warmer, not from the stoves, but from something invisible. Hope, rising like bread in the oven. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers, yet whispers had begun to crawl between the guests. They had seen the torn uniform, the defiance in the maid's eyes, the tension in Gregory's jaw. Vivian tried to laugh louder, pour more champagne, but the cracks in her perfect image were spreading. Meanwhile, down in the kitchen, Rafaela sat at a small wooden table, the torn apron folded beside her like a relic. The staff worked quietly around her, but their eyes kept drifting to that piece of fabric, sensing it carried more than just stitches. It carried a story. Thomas approached carefully. Rafaela, what exactly ties you to this house? To him? She hesitated, fingers brushing the seam. Memories stirred like dust in a forgotten room. My grandmother worked here, she finally said. Long before Vivian wore her first diamond, back then this house was smaller, humbler, and she was more than just a servant. Mrs. Lords froze mid-stir, her spoon clattering against the pot. Eunice, she whispered. I remember that name. She was kind. And then one day she disappeared. No one told us why. Rafaela nodded slowly. She didn't just vanish. She left with a secret. Thomas frowned. What kind of secret? Before Rafaela could answer, the back door creaked open. A gust of night air rushed in, carrying with it the sound of crickets and the faint hum of city traffic. A figure stepped into the light. An older man, gray hair, worn coat, but eyes sharp as glass. The staff gasped. Mr. Samuel, Lords whispered. The man nodded, removing his hat. His voice was rough, carrying years of silence. I worked here once, with Eunice, and tonight, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Rafaela's chest tightened. You knew her. Knew her? Samuel's eyes glistened. Child, I owed my life to her. She covered for me when I was sick, gave me food when I had none. She told me one day this house would remember her name. The kitchen grew still. Samuel stepped closer, lowering his voice. But she left because of something bigger. Something tied to Gregory's family. Something they've kept buried for decades. Thomas glanced nervously toward the hall. If Vivian finds you here... Vivian doesn't know the truth, Samuel cut in. But Gregory does. And he's been carrying it like a ghost on his back. Rafaela's hand shook as she clutched the apron. Tell me. Samuel looked at her with a mix of sorrow and pride. You are the proof, child. You are the bloodline they tried to erase. The words hung in the air like thunder before the storm. Maria gasped, covering her mouth. Lords crossed herself, whispering a prayer. Even Thomas, who had mastered silence for decades, staggered back as if struck. Rafaela's breath caught. Part of her had always suspected, but hearing it aloud set her world spinning. What are you saying? She whispered. Samuel leaned in, his voice low but sharp. Gregory Whitmore is not just the man who owns this house. He is bound to you. By blood. The kitchen walls seemed to close in. The secret Eunice carried, the stitch on the apron, the photograph, all the fragments began to align into something undeniable. Rafaela clutched the fabric tighter. Then this house has more than my labor in its walls, she said softly. It has my family's history, my grandmother's truth, my right to stand here. The fire in her eyes returned, brighter than before. Samuel placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. And tomorrow, child, the whole house will know. Upstairs, Vivian Whitmore floated through the ballroom with her diamond smile stretched thin. She laughed, raised her glass, and spoke louder than everyone else. But beneath the glitter, her heart raced. She could feel it, control slipping through her fingers like sand. Gregory had dismissed her from his office, in front of a maid, in front of that maid. She replayed it in her head over and over, fury boiling under her pearl necklace. One of her friends leaned in, whispering with a hint of mockery. Darling, what was that little scene earlier? That maid of yours looked rather bold. Vivian's jaw tightened. She'll be gone by midnight. But the whispers were already spreading. Guests who once envied her now exchanged sly glances. The perfect Vivian Whitmore, queen of the mansion, had been challenged, and worse, she had not won. She excused herself abruptly and stormed toward the powder room, heels striking the marble floor like gavel blows. Inside, she locked the door, gripped the counter, and stared into the mirror. For the first time in years, she didn't recognize the woman looking back. "No," she whispered to her reflection. "No one humiliates me in my own house. No one." Her hand trembled as she reached for her phone. She scrolled to a name, a fixer, someone who had solved problems for her before. She hovered her finger, then stopped. No, not yet. If Gregory discovered she acted behind his back, it would worsen everything. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Madam?" It was Maria, the young maid, voice cautious. "Do you need anything?" Vivian flung the door open, her eyes blazing. "Stay out of my sight," she snapped. Maria flinched and hurried away. Vivian smirked, feeding on the fear. But deep inside, the smirk cracked. Fear was no longer her weapon. It was her own reflection. Back in the ballroom, she found Gregory standing apart, speaking quietly with an older guest. His face looked strained, distant, not the mask of power he usually wore. Vivian crossed the room, forcing brightness into her tone. "Darling, our guests are waiting for a toast." Gregory didn't answer. His eyes flicked toward the staircase as if his mind were still downstairs with Rafaela. Vivian gritted her teeth. "Gregory!" He finally turned, his voice low and sharp. "Not now." The words cut deeper than a shout. A few guests noticed. Vivian felt her empire tremble again, invisible cracks spreading under her perfect shoes. She retreated to the sideboard, poured herself champagne, and drank it in one swallow. But the wine did nothing to steady her nerves. Through the swinging door, she caught a glimpse of the kitchen staff gathered closely, whispering. Their eyes held something dangerous. Hope. Vivian's chest tightened. Hope was contagious. Hope was rebellion. She clenched her fist around the glass until it nearly shattered. "If I don't crush this girl tonight," she hissed under her breath, "everything I built will collapse." But even as she said it, a tremor of doubt ran through her. For the first time, Vivian Whitmore, the woman who had ruled her home like a throne, felt like the ground beneath her was no longer hers. And in that moment, she realized something far more terrifying than losing face in front of her guests. She was losing Gregory. The Whitmore mansion buzzed with music, chatter, and the clinking of glasses, but beneath the surface, tension coiled like a snake ready to strike. Vivian stalked the ballroom like a queen protecting her crown. Gregory stood distant and distracted, and downstairs the staff whispered about truths long buried. Then, the front doorbell rang. Unusual. No one was expected. The guests exchanged puzzled glances. The butler Thomas, still shaken by what he had witnessed earlier, straightened his jacket and opened the heavy oak door. A cool night breeze swept inside, carrying the sound of crickets and the faint hum of traffic. On the doorstep stood a woman in her late 50s. Her coat was plain, her shoes worn, but her eyes, when steady, piercing, commanded respect. "Good evening," she said calmly. "I'm looking for Gregory Whitmore." Her voice cut through the ballroom chatter. Guests turned their heads, curious. Vivian's face tightened instantly. "Who are you?" The woman stepped forward, undaunted. "My name is Angela Barker." Rafaela, who had just stepped out of the kitchen with a tray, froze. Her heart pounded. Barker. The name carried like a thunderclap through her veins. Gregory's glass slipped slightly in his hand, though he caught it before it fell. His jaw tensed. "What are you doing here?" Angela's eyes flicked to Rafaela, then back to Gregory. "It's time the truth stopped hiding in shadows." Whispers erupted among the guests. Vivian's cheeks flushed crimson. "This is highly inappropriate. Thomas, remove this woman at once." But Thomas hesitated. Something about Angela's presence rooted him in place. Angela took another step inside, her voice ringing clear. "I came for her." She pointed directly at Rafaela. Gasps filled the air. All eyes shifted to the young maid who stood frozen with the tray in her trembling hands. "What business do you have with one of my servants?" Vivian demanded. Angela's reply was calm, unshakable. "She is not your servant. She is family." The tray nearly slipped from Rafaela's grip. A hush fell over the mansion. Even the music faltered as if the quartet sensed the storm breaking. Vivian laughed harshly, desperate. "Family? This girl? Don't be ridiculous." But Gregory said nothing. His silence was louder than any denial. Angela's gaze pinned him. "Tell them, Gregory. Tell them who she is. Tell them what Eunice kept hidden all those years." The name landed like a stone in water, ripples spreading through the room. Eunice. Vivian's smile faltered. Guests leaned in, sensing scandal, sensing blood. Rafaela's lips parted, but no words came. Tears brimmed in her eyes, not of weakness, but of release. At last, the truth was knocking on the very doors that had kept it out. Gregory set his glass down, his hand trembling ever so slightly. For a man built on control, the tremor was seismic. Vivian hissed at him under her breath. "Don't you dare!" But Angela's voice cut through. "The house remembers, Gregory. And tonight, everyone will too." The ballroom froze, suspended between lies and revelation. And Rafaela, once the humiliated maid, now stood at the center of a stage far greater than she had ever imagined. The Whitmore ballroom had turned into a courtroom without walls. Guests who once sipped champagne now clutched their glasses as if they were evidence. The string quartet fell silent, bows frozen mid-air, and in the middle stood Gregory Whitmore, the man everyone thought untouchable, cornered by truths that no amount of money could bury. Angela Barker's words still hung in the air. "She is family." Vivian broke the silence first, her laugh brittle, desperate. "Family? This is absurd. Gregory, say something." But Gregory's lips stayed pressed shut. His eyes, however, betrayed him, flickering toward Rafaela, then down to the apron folded in her arms. Angela stepped forward, her voice strong. "Years ago, before the marble floors, before the chandeliers, there was Eunice. She served this house with dignity. She raised a child who wasn't her own. She carried secrets to her grave because she thought it would protect him." Rafaela's breath caught. "My grandmother," she whispered. Gregory closed his eyes for a moment as though her voice unlocked a memory he had locked away. Angela continued, turning to the guests. "What none of you know is that Gregory's childhood wasn't silver spoons and golden cradles. It was Eunice, cooking, sewing, comforting him through winters his parents barely noticed. She was more mother to him than the woman who bore his name." Gasps filled the hall. Vivian's face drained of color. "Enough of this drama. Gregory, stop her." But Gregory finally spoke, his voice low, gravelly. "She's right." The room went still. Even Vivian's protest died in her throat. Gregory lifted his gaze, meeting Rafaela's eyes directly. "Eunice was the only person who ever protected me. When my father drank, when my mother abandoned her duties, she was there. She stitched my clothes, my wounds, my childhood back together. Without her, I would not be standing here today." Tears blurred Rafaela's vision. The truth she had carried in silence was no longer just hers. Angela nodded, her tone gentler now. "And Eunice's blood lives on, in her granddaughter." The revelation cracked like thunder. Vivian staggered back a step. No, this is impossible. You're saying this girl, this maid, is..." Gregory's voice cut in, steady now. "She is more Whitmore than half the people in this room." The guests erupted in whispers, some scandalized, others moved. The empire of appearances that Vivian had built began to crumble before her eyes. Rafaela felt her heart pound. For so long she had been the invisible one, the maid who moved silently between the rich. Now every eye was on her, not as a servant, but as someone who belonged. Vivian tried one last strike, her voice venomous. "You don't know what you're doing, Gregory. If you admit this, if you embrace her, society will destroy us." Gregory turned to her, his face hard as stone. "No, Vivian. What destroys us is cruelty. What saves us is truth." The room shook with the weight of those words, and for the first time Rafaela saw fear in Vivian's eyes. Not the fear of losing status, but the fear of losing power. The ballroom had become a storm. Whispers clashed like thunder, faces turned pale, and glasses shook in trembling hands. For the first time, the mighty Whitmore mansion didn't feel like a fortress of power. It felt like a cage of secrets breaking open. Vivian tried desperately to regain control, raising her voice above the murmurs. "Everyone, please don't listen to this nonsense. This is nothing but a trick, a scheme to embarrass us." But her words rang hollow. Too many had seen Gregory's face, heard the tremor in his voice. The truth was already loose, running wild among the guests. Suddenly, a firm knock echoed at the front door. Boom, boom, boom. The room froze. Thomas, uneasy, moved to answer it. When he pulled the heavy oak open, two figures stepped inside. A lawyer in a crisp suit and a city official with a folder in hand. Their arrival was no accident. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, speaking with authority. "Good evening. I apologize for the interruption, but we have urgent business with Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore." Vivian's face twisted. "This is outrageous. We are hosting an event." The official cut her off. "Ma'am, this concerns a matter long overdue. Records from the Whitmore estate have resurfaced. Employment contracts, letters, and documentation belonging to one Eunice Barker." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Rafaela's knees nearly buckled. The lawyer opened the folder, pulling out a faded paper. "This document shows that Eunice Barker not only worked here for decades, but was promised by Mr. Whitmore's late father that her family would receive rightful inheritance for her years of service and loyalty. That promise was never honored." Vivian staggered. "This is absurd, lies, fabrications." But Gregory's face told another story. He bowed his head, shame weighing heavy. Angela, standing tall, whispered, "The past always knocks, Vivian. And tonight, it knocked loud enough for the world to hear." The lawyer continued, his voice steady. "Furthermore, witnesses, including Mr. Samuel here, are ready to testify to Mrs. Barker's role in raising Gregory Whitmore as her own when his parents neglected him. Her name, her service, her bloodline, all erased from the history of this house." Eyes turned to Rafaela, who clutched the apron to her chest. She no longer looked like a maid. She looked like an heir. Gregory finally stepped forward, breaking the silence. His voice shook, but not with fear, with resolve. "They are not lies. Every word is true. And if justice is here tonight, then let it be done." The guests gasped again. Vivian shrieked, losing the last of her composure. "Gregory, you will destroy us. You will throw away everything we built." He turned to her sharply. "You built this house on cruelty, Vivian. But Eunice built it on love. And tonight I choose her foundation." The lawyer closed the folder with finality. "Then it is settled. The estate must acknowledge Eunice Barker's legacy and her rightful descendants." All eyes turned to Rafaela. She felt her heart race, tears stinging her eyes, but she stood tall. The official spoke gently. "Miss Rafaela, tonight, justice knocks at your door." The room erupted, some in shock, some in admiration. The whispers were no longer about scandal, but about revelation. Vivian stumbled back, her empire crumbling before her eyes. For the first time, no one listened to her voice. And Rafaela, once humiliated in a torn uniform, stood at the center of the storm, the truth shining brighter than any chandelier above her. The ballroom, once filled with arrogance and shallow laughter, now stood transformed. The guests who had come to sip champagne and flaunt wealth now whispered about justice, about truth, about a name resurrected from the shadows, Eunice Barker. And there, in the center, stood Rafaela, no longer a maid in a torn uniform, but a woman clothed in dignity. The lawyer spoke once more, his voice firm. "From this moment, the Whitmore estate formally recognizes Eunice Barker's legacy. Her descendants have the right to be acknowledged and compensated as promised." The words carried like a gavel strike. Rafaela's hands trembled, tears spilling down her cheeks, but her back remained straight. She wasn't crying from weakness. She was crying because generations of silence had finally broken. Gregory stepped forward. His voice was heavy, thick with emotion. Rafaela, I failed Eunice once. I let her carry the weight of my family's sins. But tonight, I will not fail you. This house is as much yours as it is mine, and it always will be. The guests murmured in awe. For the first time, Gregory Whitmore, the untouchable millionaire, bent his head, not in defeat, but in honor. Vivian's face twisted in horror. You can't be serious, Gregory. She's a servant, nothing more. Rafaela turned to her, her voice calm but unshakable. I was a servant in your eyes, but in God's eyes I was never less than anyone here. And tonight, the truth speaks louder than cruelty. The crowd broke into applause, not loud at first, but steady, growing. One by one, the guests rose to their feet. Some clapped out of shame, others out of admiration. But all of them knew. They were witnessing history inside these walls. Vivian, defeated, tried one last time. You will regret this, Gregory. You will all regret this. Gregory looked at her with cold finality. No, Vivian. The only regret is that I let your cruelty reign for so long. Her empire collapsed in silence. With no allies, no whispers of support, Vivian stormed out of the ballroom, her diamonds glittering but her power gone. Rafaela stood still, her heart pounding, her grandmother's words echoing in her soul. God never abandons the righteous. Angela came to her side, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. Child, Eunice's prayers are answered tonight. She is smiling in heaven. Rafaela lifted her face, her tears shining under the chandeliers. For the first time, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen by everyone in that room and by God above. She raised her voice not to boast but to inspire. To everyone here who has ever been silenced, who has ever been told they are less, know this. Dignity cannot be torn, and justice cannot be buried forever. God's truth always rises. The applause thundered now, echoing through the mansion like a hymn. The kitchen staff cried openly, hugging each other. Maria whispered through her tears, if she can rise, maybe one day, so can I. Thomas, usually stoic, bowed his head in respect. When I. Lourdes clutched her crucifix and whispered, Thank you, Lord. The humble has been lifted. As Rafaela looked around the room, the same room where she had been humiliated hours earlier, she no longer saw chains of shame. She saw open doors, new beginnings. Gregory extended his hand to her, his eyes solemn. From tonight on, Rafaela, you are not just part of this house. You are its future. She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. The act sealed not only justice, but healing. The mansion, once a prison of pride, became a sanctuary of truth. And as the night drew to a close, Rafaela whispered softly to herself, a promise to her grandmother, to her lineage, and to every soul watching. The torn cloth is mended, the broken spirit is whole, the humiliated has risen. The chandeliers sparkled brighter, as if heaven itself nodded in agreement.